This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. Concerns about safety at the Manwin Hotel on Main Street in Winnipeg have one woman advocating for it to be shut down completely. The hotel has been the scene of assaults, stabbings, and homicides. But as CBC's Josh Crabb reports, the owner says the hotel isn't the problem.
Over the past 9 months, the Manwin Hotel on Main Street has twice been the scene of a homicide. In January, a 40-year-old man was found dead here, and then in March, a 33-year-old man was discovered dead in one of the hotel's suites. Barb Guimond spends a lot of time in the area. She's now advocating for the Manwin to be shut down because she's concerned about safety.
There's been quite a few homicides here, so just generally not a good place.
On Thursday afternoon, 2 officers went inside the Manwin, but a police spokesperson didn't have details on why. Winnipeg police say calls for service in the area of the 600 block of Main Street are fairly common, but wouldn't share details about how often officers respond to the Manwin. Guimond says her concerns stem from conversations with frontline workers who help people who are homeless. She says she tried going inside, but turned back in the lobby.
I couldn't tolerate the smell, and I left. I was going to go in there with a couple of people, and but then they advised me not to go in there. Some of the frontline workers said not to go in there.
Akeem Kambamba, who identified himself as part owner of the Manwin, tells CBC his hotel is safe. He says the rooms are being renovated and the carpets are being replaced. Kambamba says the hotel has 34 suites, which are occupied by renters. He says the building was recently inspected and is providing safe housing to tenants. The province tells CBC Manitoba Health was part of a multi-agency inspection in late August and found issues with the minimum standards of housing in the hotel. It ordered repairs to washroom doors, toilets and showers, and leaking pipes. It also found issues with pests, holes in the walls, and a lack of ventilation in washrooms to prevent mold growth. The province says the owner has been in contact to say some of the issues have been addressed. A follow-up inspection has been scheduled for October 20th.
That's ridiculous. I don't see any. It looks like it's getting worse.
Guimond understands people live here and says more resources are needed to help them find somewhere safer. She raised the issue last month in a meeting with Winnipeg's mayor. A spokesperson for Scott Gillingham says Guimond was connected with Winnipeg police and the mayor is monitoring the situation. The hotel remains open. Josh Crabb, CBC News, Winnipeg.
It is day 6 in the Israel-Hamas conflict. Thousands of Israeli troops are positioned along the border with Gaza, and Israel's military says it's preparing for a ground offensive should leaders give the order. The war in the Middle East has so many people upset. Winnipeg police are increasing patrols around cultural centres. Synagogues, mosques, and schools are stepping up security over fears this most recent conflict could spill into Canada. Matt Humphrey has more.
This is a wonderful multicultural city, and we want to make sure that we don't import the conflict, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, into Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada.
The Jewish Federation of Winnipeg wants to make sure everyone stays safe this Shabbat. The Federation put out a warning today saying there's no known or specific threat to the city's Jewish community, but proactive steps are being taken out of an abundance of caution.
As they show up to campus today and tomorrow, they'll see the services provided by the Winnipeg Police Service, so they're uniformed police officers. There is protection in the area. We have instituted some controls internally. It's a community that it's sort of known to have to spend quite a bit of effort and time and money, resources, providing this enhanced level of protection.
Gustavo Zentner is the president of the Federation. He says the community is aware of communications online promoting a day of mobilization for supporters of Hamas, saying Friday will be a day of heroism and sacrifice. Zentner says they could see protests at Jewish buildings, including the Asper Jewish Community Campus.
People are really concerned, and many are scared. People say if it happened in Israel, it may happen anywhere in the world, and to some degree, those are valid concerns. In Winnipeg, in Canada, we really don't think much of that happening in our very own city or communities, and as a result, we want to ask people of all faiths and backgrounds to be mindful and respectful.
A sentiment reflected at the Eitz Chaim Synagogue. President Avram Shirak says extra security precautions are being taken to ensure everyone's safety, but people in the community are feeling alarmed and are supporting one another.
They're all worried. A lot of our community are panic-stricken. My daughter, for example, she's taken off the Magen David she usually wears because she's afraid that someone's going to attack her. And she came to my office today, drove 35 minutes to my office just to give me a hug. That's not her, but that's how people are feeling, and it's not just Jewish people feeling that. I think most people of good conscience are just horrified at what's going on.
For safety reasons, both Chirac and Winnipeg police are not going into security specifics, but say the situation is being monitored closely. Matt Humphrey, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Coming up in the program, we'll get you the latest from CBC journalists who are in Israel, and we'll ask a Winnipeg professor how she explains what's going on. A woman at the center of a Point Douglas drug ring could end up sentenced to a decade in prison. Late last month, Sandra Gibosh pleaded guilty to conspiring to traffic cocaine. Court documents say the 59-year-old was the head of an organization that sold pink-colored crack cocaine in Winnipeg. She and more than 24 others were arrested by Winnipeg police in 2021. More than $2 million in property, cash, and drugs were seized after a 5-month investigation dubbed Project Matriarch. Federal Crown prosecutors are expected to seek a sentence for Gibosh of up to 10 years. Some of Manitoba's leading performing arts organizations have announced deficits in their annual reports, mainly due to the lingering effects of the pandemic. CBC's Zubina Ahmed reports on how the province's arts and cultural scene has been impacted.
Graceful and expressive dance movements, elaborate costumes, and enchanting music. The Royal Winnipeg Ballet is the longest operating ballet company in North America. But in a pandemic recovery world, they are struggling in terms of finances.
We had a deficit of $520,000 or thereabouts. And the reason for this is partially because of lower audience attendance, lower student enrollment in our professional division and recreational division, and also inflation.
Lewis said it will take a couple of years for the recovery road and believes that with some rebuilding efforts, things will rebound to pre-pandemic levels.
We are making some changes to the organization in order to do this. Like one of the big things we did this season is open on a Thursday rather than on a Wednesday, provide 4 shows instead of 5. We just did Snow White, which did incredibly well.
Facing a similar impact is the Royal Manitoba Theatre Centre.
So we had an $800,000 deficit, and really what that represented was a loss of predominantly in the subscribers. So subscribers are our loyalists who come to buy once and come to a variety of shows.
Holland says they are at 80% of the pre-pandemic numbers and believes that Manitobans need to come back in person for a secure and stable future of the art scene.
It's a really important time for Manitobans to invest with their personal energy towards the arts, and that means coming downtown, buying a ticket, buying a subscription, making a donation. That's going to make a real difference.
Last week, Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra also announced a $1.3 million deficit for the 2022-23 season.
We knew at least 2 years ago that probably audience revenues would not return to pre-pandemic levels for some time. A lot of the data out there was saying 3 to 5 years, and they're saying 5 to 7 years. So we knew it was coming, and fortunately the board had in reserves.
Birdsell says the decline of the arts sector is not only from reduced audiences, but also from decades of flatline government funding, a critical point of concern. Zabina Ahmed, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The owner of a shop in Winnipeg's Exchange District is happy police are diverting some foot patrols to downtown Winnipeg. The police say some patrols are moving downtown from community districts. Some people in those districts have been critical of that move. But Tara Davis of the Tara Davis Boutique says this is good news for the Exchange. She says police on foot often get to know people suffering from addictions and mental health issues in the neighborhood.
Neighborhood has a lot of challenges around homelessness and mental illness and addictions, and when the Foot Patrol knows people by name and their circumstance, I think that's really helpful to the community and to those people.
Sel Burrows, a longtime advocate for community safety in North Point Douglas, has criticized the diversion of foot patrols from other parts of Winnipeg to the downtown. Storms and spring runoff cause sewage to spill into Winnipeg's rivers from the city's combined sewers hundreds of times a year. The city says it has a plan to reduce the number of spills, but as CBC's Cameron McLean tells us, a new report says it could take until 2095 to put that plan in place, unless the federal and provincial governments pitch in.
Last year, the number of combined sewer overflows more than doubled compared to the previous year. In 2021, there were 910 events. In 2022, there were more than 2,000. The city has a plan to reduce that by 2045, but a report says it could take half a century longer unless the province and federal government provide funding. Today, the Water and Waste Committee ordered a report on how much rates would need to increase for the city to do the work itself. Chair Brian Mays estimated it could be as much as $100 more per household.
Maybe it's too much, $100 a household, but at least let's have the debate. Let's not sit there and pretend it's the fault of other levels of government and claim it's going to take till I'm well past 100 years old.
The City of Winnipeg estimates the combined sewer project will cost more than $1 billion. The report on rate increases is expected in November. Cameron McLean, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Meteorologist John Sauter joins us now. We've got some cloud up there now, quite a lot of it, but there was sun earlier, and that was lovely.
I must admit, a lot more sun today than I had pictured in my forecast yesterday. We've got high pressure to the north, and it gets circulated a little bit of that dry air down into southern Manitoba. So, yes, nice to see the sun. Let's start with the current conditions. Right now, we're at 12 degrees. We did make it to 14 earlier. Northeast winds were as strong as 33 kilometers per hour. Right now, sitting at about 17. Yeah, you know what? Not a bad afternoon out there with a light jacket. Normal high is 11, so 12 right now. Doing pretty well. But look at this patch of clear right over southern Manitoba. Of course, very sunny across the far north. Thompson up through Lynn Lake and Churchill. Beautiful sunny day today. You can see the breaks in the cloud here, though, and right over Winnipeg, I can see just past Janet there out the window that we've got some cloud right over downtown Winnipeg right now. But it'll be in and out, kind of a partly cloudy sky overnight. And I wanted to show you some temperatures across Canada because it really cooled off in southern Saskatchewan. So some of the warmest temperatures are right here in southern Manitoba. If you don't look at Kelowna and Vancouver at 16 and 14 respectively. A similar down through Toronto at 11, Ottawa at 8, and out to the east we're looking at double-digit highs as well. But I wanted to show you this because high pressure is kind of keeping this low pressure to the south of us. Down through South Dakota, parts of Minnesota. Major rainy system tonight and tomorrow in those areas, and that will stay south of the border. Looks like this on Futurecast for us. Some breaks in the cloud tonight. Kind of starts to fill in tomorrow. We may see a shower up around Swan River, up around the Riding Mountain area, but just a passing sprinkle is all I'm expecting. Friday afternoon, the clouds do start to fill in, but it'll be kind of a day like today or like right now where we see cloud cover and a few breaks in that cloud. And then on Saturday, I do think the cloud thickens up. And this is when, in the morning hours, we're going to start to see that partial solar eclipse over southern Manitoba as well. And right now it looks like cloud cover, but you know, it'll be something to see even if you see a couple breaks in that cloud. Just remember to use the proper eyewear for protecting your eyes if you are going to look at the sun. Okay, here's Saturday afternoon. We've got some clearing to the north of us, and then that starts to work its way in by the time we get into Saturday night, Sunday morning. Much brighter weather on the way for the second half of the weekend. 3 degrees. Partly cloudy skies tonight. Tomorrow morning, if If you want to head out for an early walk, 5 degrees, partly cloudy, northeast winds about 15 to 20 tomorrow, and then 12 degrees with mainly cloudy skies, but you can see the little patches of blue there. As we get into the long range, we've got that cloudy day on Saturday, so slightly cooler, and then sunshine and 13s for Sunday and Monday.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Surprise attacks by Hamas militants from the Gaza Strip launched the current fighting with Israel. But the origins of this conflict stretch back generations. Tammy Jacoby is a political science professor at the University of Manitoba who specializes in the politics of the Middle East. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
You live in Winnipeg now, but you're actually an Israeli citizen. Other than the concerns you must have for friends and family, what worries you most about this conflict?
What worries me is escalation. I have friends on both sides, colleagues, family, so I'm devastated, and I just hope that this doesn't escalate beyond the Israel-Palestine conflict.
We have seen bombings back and forth in the past quite often. What makes this fighting more concerning and seems so much more intense?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. This has been a cyclical conflict. It simmers and then flares up from time to time, but this one is qualitatively and quantitatively different. I know there are conspiracies going around, but the Israeli intelligence services were unprepared. And this time Hamas, which is the Islamist resistance movement in Gaza, had at their disposal, the quantity of weapons was astounding, and that they were able to break through the security barrier was very shocking.
Is there an easy way to explain the history of this battle between Israel and Hamas?
Well, it started out as I don't mean to downplay it, but it's like a real estate conflict. Both the Jewish nation and the Palestinian nation are fighting over the same territory, and they've been building facts on the ground to their own benefit for, as you said, generations now.
We tend to talk about people as being pro-Palestinian or pro-Israeli, but how much of this is actually that black and white?
Well, I don't see it as black and white. I've been studying this for 30 years, and I would say that most of it is gray because despite the social media and the news reports on it now, this has been going on for a long time. It's cyclical, it's very nuanced, and people don't really understand the background of this conflict and the divisions within the Palestinians, within Israel, and the diasporas of both communities. So there are more actors than just two.
Who else could be involved?
Well, Egypt and Saudi Arabia have offered mediation services. The United States is, the Secretary of State is visiting now. Saudi Arabia has been in touch with Iran, I guess, to make sure that they don't get involved more than they have already. And so I don't think that it's going to escalate beyond the Middle East, but I just hope that any third-party intervention is to moderate rather than pour fuel on the fire.
Now, I remember past rounds of moderation of negotiations, which aimed at what they called at the time a two-state solution, where both Israel and Palestine would agree to exist as states and coexist. Do you believe that's still possible?
Well, I grew of age in the 90s when a two-state solution was the only solution considered, and that has become much less popular now for a variety of reasons. The Palestinians want one state, a Palestinian state. The Israelis want one state, an Israeli state. And it's very difficult to see what kind of state the Palestinians would have, since their two political parties, Hamas and Fatah, Fatah is in charge of the West Bank, are in charge of territories that are not contiguous. They can't build a state on the kind of territory they have, particularly with Jewish settlements dotted throughout the West Bank.
How hopeful are you that we're going to see peace, or at least a cessation of fighting soon?
I hope there's a ceasefire immediately, but I don't see it coming very soon. And for a resolution, I'm sure there are better minds than me to think about how to resolve this conflict definitely.
Tammy Jacoby, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Still ahead, Israel prepares for a ground assault. Troops are gathering at Gaza's border as Israeli missiles rain down for a 6th straight day. More after the break. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. To the Middle East now, where Israel says more than 1,300 people have been killed in that country since Saturday, and that Hamas is holding up to 150 people hostage. In Gaza, health authorities say about 1,500 are dead. Israel's bombardment of Gaza continues in response to the deadly surprise attack by Hamas on Saturday. Meantime, Hamas militants have fired thousands of rockets into Israel, and there are fears the conflict could spread in the region. On the ground in Gaza, there's no electricity. The power plant ran out of fuel yesterday. Hospitals are overwhelmed and running out of supplies. Israel says nothing will be allowed into Gaza until Hamas frees Israeli hostages. More than 300,000 people have fled their homes in Gaza. Talks about opening a humanitarian aid corridor through Egypt are ongoing. The CBC's Paul Hunter traveled to one of the locations that was attacked by Hamas in Saturday, the site of a music festival, which was being held close to the border with the Gaza Strip. Here's his report on what journalists saw there.
This is the scene of that rave last Saturday where so many Israelis were massacred. The Israeli Defense Force has allowed journalists in today to look around at what's left, and it is almost undescribable. Even as we speak, there's what seems to be artillery fire. Fighter jets have been going overhead. There's been explosions just off in the distance. We're very close to the Gaza Strip here, where Hamas came and killed. Everywhere you look, there are destroyed cars. There are bullet holes everywhere, broken glass, of course. There's blood in the sand still, all over the place, burnt out cars. What's striking is the scale. It goes on and on and on. There were so many people here, chased down, murdered. 260 people were killed here. The bodies have been taken away. This is so that we can see. The whole place is a testament to the horror of what happened. Everything trashed as all those lives were destroyed and ended. It is nauseating. Paul Hunter, CBC News, just outside the Gaza Strip.
The first 2 Canadian evacuation flights took off from Tel Aviv today, bound for Athens, Greece. More Canadian military flights are scheduled over the next several days. Canadian officials say about 800 people have requested assistance to get out of Israel. Kate McKenna has the latest.
In a sea of people desperate to get out of Israel, this is a welcome sight for some Canadians in the crowd.
We're sending these Canadians home, the tourists home, because we think that risk exists.
This family got the call and packed up.
We were at the lawyer's office and quickly finished that up, went home and picked up the luggage and came here.
Additional airlines announced they're suspending flights from Tel Aviv, and officials say they've seen a surge in Canadians wanting to leave. More than 275 left today, after days of horror and uncertainty.
Missiles were intercepted overhead, directly overhead, that we spent a great deal of time in the bomb shelter, and one of our sons was almost paralyzed with anxiety because of the situation and had to be reassured quite constantly.
Robin Cox was in Israel for her nephew's wedding.
We were of mixed feelings because my husband's family are all here, and we came for a very, very large and joyful celebration, and we know that we're leaving them behind.
Canadian officials say at least 2 flights per day will leave until everyone who wants to leave Israel can. But they say they can't help the 100 people in Gaza who've asked for assistance unless a humanitarian corridor opens.
We are working very hard with all of our allies and friends and partners who want to see peace returned to the region, want to see civilian lives protected. This is an unbelievably difficult situation.
Canadians have started to arrive in Athens on those flights from Tel Aviv. The government says it'll help passengers find hotels and book an Air Canada flight at their own expense. The first one is expected to arrive tomorrow in Toronto. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Ottawa.
U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken was in Tel Aviv today to reaffirm America's unwavering support for Israel in its fight against Hamas.
As long as there's the United States, Israel will never be alone.
Antony Blinken met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, showed him graphic images from Saturday's attack. Blinken says he's working with Israel to gain the release of hostages being held by Hamas, some of whom are American. He's urged Israel to avoid harming civilians. Blinken is scheduled to hold meetings with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and King Abdullah of Jordan tomorrow. The man facing murder and terrorism charges in the fatal attack on a Muslim family here in Canada testified in court today. Nathaniel Veltman struck the family with his truck in London, Ontario in June of 2021. 4 people were killed. A 9-year-old boy survived. As Thomas Degg reports, Veltman was the defense's first witness.
Nathaniel Veltman appeared nervous but spoke clearly, answering questions from his lawyer and sometimes looking at the jury seated near him in the courtroom. Veltman testified about what he described as his fundamentalist Christian upbringing. The now 22-year-old was homeschooled in small-town Strathroy, Ontario, and recalled in court his mother punishing him frequently and preventing him from seeing other children she considered unchristian. Veltman said, "I turned into this cauldron of rage and secretly hated her." He left the family home at age 16. He's now facing charges of terrorism-motivated murder after running over the Afzal family with his pickup truck in June 2021. After the Crown presented its case, today defense lawyer Christopher Hicks made his opening statement, telling jurors the intention to kill was not formed and there was no planning and deliberation.
We're disputing the intention involved in these matters, okay? The criminal intent that's necessary for these charges.
The jury was previously shown video of the accused telling police he targeted Muslims and that in his words it wasn't just murder but terrorism. The court also heard last month that Veltman had taken magic mushrooms the day before the attack. The defense's next witness is expected to be a forensic psychiatrist set to testify about the impact of hallucinogenic substances. Thomas Dagg, CBC News, Toronto.
Afghan migrants in Pakistan could soon face deportation. That's the Pakistani government's warning for those who are there illegally. It is ominous news for people trying to head to another country but waiting for documents. Canada is one of those destinations. The CBC's Rafi Boujakanyan has the story.
Pakistan, home to an estimated 1.4 million Afghan migrants. But the country says as of November 1st, it will remove those who are there illegally. And the Afghans have been getting warnings from the UN's migration agency.
They came over to the hotels and they informed us and they told us they might not help us if they catch us.
Mohammad Yunus Nasimi fled the Taliban 2 years ago and sought temporary refuge in Pakistan. A former military contractor with the Canadian Armed Forces, he and his family have been waiting to see if Immigration Canada will approve their trip here on special measures for Afghans who used to work for the Canadian military or government.
We cannot blame anybody for this except the Immigration Office. What is the reason that it's taking them that much long?
Others have already had a brush with the law. We've agreed to hide this Afghan refugee applicant's identity. His brother was briefly arrested by local police on an errand to fetch medication 2 weeks ago.
I got a lot of money, and after 4 to 5 days, we were able to release him back from the jail.
Still, he says that's little reassurance. Visas for many in his family have expired and they cannot afford to renew them.
We don't want to be arrested or captured by the police, especially when our children and families are in hotels and we have nobody else to take care of them.
Refugee advocates say Ottawa must pick up the pace in processing paperwork for migrants, while it teams up with the international community to convince Pakistan to back off.
We have to act to make the deadline not real and urge Pakistan to stand down, but we need to act urgently in the context where the deadline may well be real.
The UN's migration agency says it is instructing migrants to check in with their hotels whenever they leave their rooms. This is not the first time Pakistan has threatened to deport paperless migrants. In the past, Immigration Canada received assurances those who are bound here would only face fines or bans on returning to Pakistan. This time, the department would just say they're in constant contact with Pakistani authorities. Rafi Bujikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
In October 2017, Canada reversed its policy on marijuana, making the drug legal. This week, findings from a study were published on the use of marijuana and its consequences since that time. The CBC's Christine Burak has details.
5 years post-legalization, public health experts say more Canadians are using cannabis. Hospitalizations are up, and the drug is linked to some serious health concerns.
So this is one of the things we need to take seriously and try to change.
A commentary published in the Canadian Medical Association journal outlines cannabis use has increased to more than a quarter of Canadians. The number of pot-related pregnancy care cases has doubled, harming newborns. And while still rare, 3 times as many children were poisoned by edible cannabis products.
This is disconcerting. This is not what was ideally expected from legalization.
Studies show Alberta and Ontario have seen a 20% increase in cannabis-related ER visits, including more cases of cannabis-induced psychosis. Doctors say that's troubling.
If you have an emerge visit for cannabis-induced psychosis, in absolute terms, you have a 26% chance of developing schizophrenia within 3 years.
We still need to understand what are the biological mechanisms of why some people are more vulnerable than others.
She adds pot users under 16 are at higher risk of mental health problems. While legalization was supposed to cut youth usage, surveys show 30 to 50% are still using cannabis, one of the highest rates in the world.
The first time I smoked cannabis to deal with my stress, I failed 2 courses in a year. And then was homeless at the end of that semester.
Lucas Wade became addicted and tried to take his own life. He says governments need better pot policies.
You have an ethical responsibility to make treatment for that substance just as accessible as it is getting the substance itself.
While the health impacts of legal pot have largely been negative, experts say fewer arrests and criminal charges related to cannabis use can be seen as social justice wins that may indirectly improve public health. But doctors insist, going forward, governments need to refine the rules, start treating cannabis more like tobacco. Christine Burak, CBC News, Toronto.
Still ahead, meteorologist John Sauter. Let's look at the weather going down the road in his Manitoba forecast. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. Hey, we just realized there was a math error, a date error in one of the introductions to a story I just read. Cannabis was legalized in Canada in 2018, not 2017. That's why it's been 5 years. Get it? Math. Math is good. A Calgary man is on a unique humanitarian mission for Ukraine. The way he's bringing aid money in is by rocking out. The CBC's Aaron Collins has the story.
It's a music tour with a twist. This Canadian in Ukraine making music, hoping to make a difference too.
How do you say responsibility in Ukrainian?
Well, this school of rock is in a Lviv religious school. Its founder teaching bar chords and distributing aid provided by an Alberta charity, dropping off medicine, food, and a few tunes in the area.
We're taking it on the road to orphanages like every weekend. We went up to one last weekend to share music and bananas and chocolate with little kids.
Well, this city is far from the front line of Ukraine's war with Russia, but students here are still impacted by the conflict.
People dying, and actually my uncle was died last year. So yeah, it's
A little rock and roll providing a temporary escape.
They feel relaxed, they forget about it, They forget about their situation for a little bit.
The founder of Lviv's School of Rock and his students will take center stage this Friday. Headliners in a global online concert live streaming on YouTube to raise more money for people here.
Let's stay with Ukraine. They're our allies, and let's keep acting like that.
Musicians from London to Los Angeles and everywhere in between logging on to jam.
The whole community, grab hands and put this together to make a great event, to fundraise for these people and help all these people.
A reminder that even in dark times, spirits can be lifted one chord at a time. Aaron Collins, CBC News, Calgary.
Time to check in with meteorologist John Sauter again, and this time we're going to talk about a big storm that's brewing in the Pacific.
Yeah, it's in the Pacific. It's out over water. It's not really affecting any land masses, and frankly, it probably won't the way it's tracking right now. But, Janet, a lot of people ask me, what's the similarity between, or is there a difference between a typhoon and a hurricane? And go ahead. Yeah. There really isn't, actually. It's just a different part of the world. It's called a typhoon. This one, I'll show you the map here. This one's sitting way out over there, Typhoon Bolivan. Today has strengthened to a Category 5, so that brings it up to super typhoon strength. This one is a doozy. Well-defined eye right there. So just to put this into perspective, Northern Pacific, this is Japan over here, and this one is headed in a northeasterly direction. Now, as we look at the winds in this, 215 kilometers per hour, those are the sustained winds. The gusts are at about 350 kilometers per hour, if you can imagine how strong that is. Now, this tracking device has it as a Category 3 by early tomorrow, Saturday, 6 a.m., still a Category 2, and then weakening to a Category 1 as it moves over cooler waters in the Northern Pacific. So this one will continue to track to the northeast. Question is, in about a week's time, will it still be brewing around and start to get into parts of northern Canada or Alaska, things like that? So we'll keep on watching it. It's something you'll see in the news, so now you've seen it here. Lots of 12s on the map at the airport, 13 at the Forks, and as we go into the southwest, very similar temperatures. The similarities or the consistencies in our weather as far as time and space is really kind of surprising this week. So as far as the geography is concerned, you go to the north and you see temperatures that are much the same as here in the south. And as far as time is concerned, this isn't really going to change much as we go forward, especially in southern Manitoba. But these are the currents across the north. Even at this hour, it's 12 degrees in Churchill. That is warm. Another day like that on the way for tomorrow. You can see the cloud cover and the breaks in the cloud cover and the clear sky to the far north. tonight over northwestern Ontario, we're looking at single-digit lows, 4 to 6. Generally cloudy conditions. Could see a couple of sprinkles around the Dryden area. Not much in the way of rain in the forecast either. 3 in Winnipeg, 3s and 4s through most areas. 7 in Gimli. A little cooler, though, near the water, certainly. And then as we move out to the west, again, a couple of sprinkles around Swan River, but temperatures around 4 to 6 degrees for lows. We do get a little cooler, as you would expect, across the north, especially where there is skies that are a little bit clear, far north and out to the east. And then tomorrow, we're looking at double-digit highs again and some cloud around the Paw, Norway House, but lots of sunshine in the far north and another 12-degree high in Churchill and in Gillam. Across the south, we're looking at generally cloudy skies, a couple sprinkles around Swan River. That's only about a 30% chance of a shower. And here in the southeast, we could see a few breaks in the cloud once again. I think the better chance for sun is in the morning, clouds kind of filling in the afternoon. And again, a consistent 12 degrees, 11 for Kenora and 11 for Fort Frances. A little bit more in the way of sun for Kenora and for Dryden tomorrow.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
A Vancouver Island gas station was visited by a unique shoplifter recently.
The door was open and he just sauntered in and slowly walked around the store and sniffed a few things and found what he wanted and basically left.
I thought it was amazing. I thought it was so cool.
It's one of a growing number of incidents involving black bears in British Columbia, things caught on security cameras. It is something provincial conservation officials attribute to the weather's impact on natural food sources. No one was hurt. The bear wanted something. What did he take? Gummy bears, of course. Do you recognize this gentleman in the red shirt? If you've lived in Winnipeg or Manitoba a long time, you just might recognize this old footage. That's David Northcott. He is being honored in Winnipeg tonight for his decades of work helping people who need food security in this province. We're going to talk to the longtime director of what was called Winnipeg Harvest after the break. He started his career in banking, but David Northcott is known in Winnipeg for his work to help people who don't have the financial means to buy food themselves. He's being honored tonight as a longtime director of what we knew once as Winnipeg Harvest. Hello, David Northcott. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for the invitation.
How do you feel about being honored at the Victories Over Hunger and Poverty Gala?
It's an odd situation because there's the people that have made this go. Some have passed away, but they're people who lived the really tough world, and that group should be the ones that are at this table. I was the one that just on the line to be able to make sure we were pointed in the right direction. It's funny to be one person because it's not a one-person pathway.
No, of course, it takes so many of us to do that work, but you were the face of explaining hunger to Manitobans for so many years. I remember decades ago having conversations with you where you actually talked about food banks being a temporary measure. That was your hope. Do you still have that hope?
Still have the hope. I mean, it's distressing that it's been taken so long. That we were involved with the unit. We wanted to have a legal piece. We looked at the right to food, and the UN supported the right to food, and so that sort of sounded really good for a while. Then it faded away. All the things we've tried to change structure to make sure people got more money so that they could live on. It just didn't catch, and we just couldn't sustain it, and that's the challenge.
That must be frustrating.
Yeah. We've got smart people. We should be able to figure it out.
And we've got governments who say repeatedly that they want to make things easier for people. Why do you think it still hasn't happened?
I don't think that there's a full push behind them. There's so many other people trying to pull into that cash, into that money for all sorts of noble and good things. It's a very difficult, it would be a difficult piece to say no to a poor and hungry person, but knowing that you don't have another health system for them. You know, it's this pattern that is, if we do this here, we lose this over here. And I get that. But at the bottom end of things, there is no other place to go. And that's what the food bank sort of came in and say, we'll do this in a temporary way, and we'll make sure we'll work hard together so we won't have to feed our citizens. They should be able to participate in society on their own.
What does it do to a child? What does it do to a child to grow up in poverty? And that's a long-term issue.
It's a long-term hurt too. It's a difficult pathway to be in. It's difficult for the mums particularly that really have shouldered so many different things, and it breaks people. There's a lot of mental health and struggles attached to a lot of the lower income kind of stuff. But you know, we had one friend of ours that struggled with it, and he would take all his clothing every day and he'd bring it to Harvest and volunteer and take it all back because he sort of smelled, and he wasn't very close to a washing machine, all that kind of stuff. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, he came back. We had a nice visit, and he was changed. He was clean. He was upright. He came in with the bus. It was spectacular. And you know what happened? He turned 60.
Oh, and was able to access government funding that he couldn't access before.
Exactly. So it worked.
David Northcott, thank you for your time today, and enjoy this evening.
Thank you, and thank you for your pathway of time over the years. You're very gracious. Thank you.
The far too humble and kind David Northcott. John's back with your 7-day forecast in just a moment.
Well, clouds are breaking up now over downtown, so partly cloudy tonight. A little bit of sun in the morning and then some cloud with sunny breaks in the afternoon Friday. Very consistent temperatures, a cloudy 11 on Saturday, a pair of 13s Sunday and Monday with sunshine. And then look at next week. We could even hit 15 by Thursday next week, and that is well above seasonal. Now, you have to love animal videos, and here is one a little bird told me about.
Here is your daily lift. That is a wild chickadee that flew up onto Adam Sword's shoulder when it saw his pet parrot Zurich climb up Adam's arm. Now, Adam's a Winnipegger who was trying to help the groggy little chickadee after it flew into a window. The little guy seemed very, very interested in the much larger 8-year-old parrot. And Adam says, based on their body language, he believes the tiny chickadee was the dominant bird of the two of them. Adam says no birds were harmed in the making of this video. The chickadee's fine, although it may have a bit of a goose egg on its head.
Isn't that amazing?
From hitting that window.
They are totally getting along, those two little birds. That's great.
That's totally cute.
Thanks, Adam, for sending that to us.
And thank you for watching tonight. See you tomorrow.
See ya.